All right, hello and welcome. 0.7.10 is on the horizon, and with that we have our first of two developer blogs. This one is on the defenses, and as the title suggests, the defenses are getting overhauled. That should tell you that this is going to be pretty substantial, and it is. So let's go ahead and cover the basics of what's going to be happening here in the new patch. But first, I'll let you know that when the patch actually does hit, I will be releasing a video that should cover these defenses in far more detail. So if you're looking for the nitty-gritty, exactly what is going to be happening to basically every defense in the game, keep a lookout for that particular video. For this one, though, we'll keep it a little bit more simple. So here's the overview of the changes. Protections are being replaced by percentage-based resistances, and armor is now separate from the resistance system and reduces damage taken from all hits. This is maybe the most substantial of all the changes in here, and there are several. The protection systems that it currently is something that is pretty unintuitive to a lot of new players. So changing it over to percentage-based resistance system, which will be capped, by the way, at 75%, as they tell you here in the resistance system changes section, should be something that players from games like Path of Exile should be much more used to seeing. Now, armor being separated from the resistance system is also very interesting, and the armor section of what currently are protections is getting replaced by physical resistance. Armor is now going to be something that's based on hits. The old version of it being in the protection system also applied to physical dots, aka bleed. So armor no longer does that, but the physical resistance will do that, as will all of the resistances. So resistances apply to all, including dots. Armor will not apply to all, it'll only apply to hits, but it will apply to all hits. And it's a separate system from the resistances. Hope you got all that. So we're going to have resistances now, we're replacing protections, and then armor as another defensive layer sort of on top of that. Now, glancing blow used to be another defensive layer on top of that. Is currently, or is going to be, no longer a primary defense stat. It still exists, but has been removed from most items and abilities. Now, for anyone who didn't like glancing blow and the current requirement that you cap this to get 50% reduced damage taken from all hits, you'll probably see that as a pretty big positive. Glancing blow capping is no longer going to be something that we're going to be worried about. Glancing blow does still exist. It looks like it's going to be in far fewer sources, and so as they talk about later in the dev blog, it won't even be possible to get 100% glancing blow anymore. The next line in the overview states that penetration, shred, and defensive bonuses from attributes have all been reworked. I actually want to talk about these in two separate parts. Penetration and shred are very closely related, the attributes not so much. So if we scroll down to the penetration and shred sections, we will find that penetration is going to be sort of a straight reduction of resistance towards the enemy. So if you have 20% fire pen against an enemy, they have 50% fire resistance. They now have 30% fire resistance. You will reduce it by 20%. This also works if they don't have any fire resistance, or if they don't have as much as you have pen, because it can go negative. So if they have 0 resistance and you have 20 fire pen, they'll actually take more damage still, regardless. So this still works even if the enemy doesn't have any resistance at all. So that's really nice. Shred is going to work similarly, except it stacks. So we're looking at a 5% reduction resistance against most enemies, 2% against bosses and players, and it can stack up to 20 times. So you can get up to 100% resistance shred on regular enemies and something like, 40% on bosses. So these redesigns on penetration and shred are designed to make them more viable, more valuable to builds, to actually increase your damage by a substantial amount. Something that the protection system really didn't offer. Shred and penetration in the protection system were pretty weak, and most players were avoiding them. So hopefully this will make them a lot more interesting for builds. The other defense changes cover several things. We already talked about glancing blow and it not being possible to acquire enough to cap it at 100%, and it being a lot rarer. Some changes to health, changes to set affixes is a pretty significant thing. So they talk about how glancing blow set affixes used to be all over a lot of different gear, but the other ones were a little bit more niche. Now they're going to be more like set glancing blow was. And the idea here is just to give you an alternative way of capping resistance, and to not be required on any particular one piece of gear, so that you have a lot more flexibility in your gearing choices. As far as your primary stats go, only two are really changing significantly: Vitality and Attunement. Attunement is going from an elemental protection system to mana, and Vitality is going from 15 Void, Necrotic, and Poison protection to 10 health and 2% increased health regen. The devs explain this change is due to the fact that there are now caps on resistances. It wouldn't make sense to kind of convert over, say, have a % resistance of Void, Necrotic, and Poison on Vitality, because that cap would mean that that primary stat at some point would become less useful, or maybe even useless. You wouldn't want to use it anymore, and that doesn't make sense for primary stats. So this is a better way of allowing you to continue to stack those primary stats and not worry about diminishing returns or even making them not useful at all. Okay, the last section to talk about is what happens to existing items. I'm going to go ahead and read this off. Where possible, fixes have been changed to ones that provide a similar purpose to old ones that have been removed. For example, existing protection suffixes have been changed to resistance suffixes for the same damage type, but many other cases didn't have such clear replacements. You may see a few strange affixes on items you found before the patch. We recommend reviewing equipped gear to ensure it still suits your character, or starting a new character to experience all the changes we made to the early chapter of the game. So, the idea here is, when possible, the affixes should be fairly similar as far as what they do compared to the old ones, but that wasn't always the case. So if you have existing characters, bear that in mind and take a look at their gear before you just go off and start checking everything out, because you might find that you have some gaps that you otherwise wouldn't have had in the old system that you might want to address. All right, that covers everything here. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I will be releasing a much more comprehensive guide to the changes in the defensive system here soon after the patch releases, so be on the lookout for that. And also, as always, I stream on Twitch 5 to 6 days a week. Would love to have you come join and chat and talk about the defensive system, or whatever else you'd like to talk about, LE or video gaming related. And that also applies to my Discord, where we have lots of conversations about not just LE. We even talk about computers lately and how to build one, but talk about all kinds of different things. Feel free to come and join in on those conversations. All right, thank you so much for watching. Have a great time on Last Epoch, and I look forward to seeing you all again real soon, hopefully in 0.7.10.